afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session, which is on surgical training. We'll start with the keynote, but before that, I'll request the other chairpersons of this session to please come up on the dais. Dr. P.K. Pandey had expressed his inability to come. Dr. Vijaya, Dr. Jayanta Kumar Das, Dr. Kiran Kumar, and Dr. Niluparna. Dr. Grover is here, of course. He'll join us after his presentation. And Dr. Chandna Chakrabarti. So I hope as they come, we will have them coming up on the dais. This is on surgical training. And as I said, we'll start with the keynote address, setting up a wet lab and introducing OSCAR for surgical training. Dr. A.K. Grover, who has a very, very long and illustrious career in teaching and, of course, helping AIOS set up its teaching setups. Dr. Grover.
Thank you, Dr. Rohit and Dr. Jayanta and other members on the dais. It is a privilege to be a part of this AIOS ICO ARC PG teaching program. The work that is being done by the PG teaching program, the teachers training program is wonderful. It is being done at the regional levels also, and all credit to ARC for having taken up this program by the ICO so well. So the first thing that we need to emphasize is that surgical training is vital to a resident's growth and resident's training. And in fact, it has been added to the core competencies, the 6 core competencies that were recognized by the American Board for Residency Training. And this was added as a 7th one as a core competency because the surgical training is really vital. So this session is important for that reason. So we are finally on. And this has also been an integral component of all our national curricula by the Medical Council and by the National Board. Now the early surgical training, the various models that have been practiced are the animal practice models, virtual reality simulators, which Dr. Atul was mentioning this morning, artificial practice eye models, which can fit in with the animal practice models in the wet lab, and the computer-based learning. Of all these models, it is realized that animal practice eye models remain the closest approximation to real surgery. And therefore, wet labs are being increasingly thought of as important in surgical training. Each of us needs to decide for ourselves whether we need to have a wet lab in our setup. You have to look at the number of residents you have to look at your manual resources in terms of whether there is space, whether there is enough money which can be sought from sponsors or from your own residency resources. And whether you can, if your numbers are less, can you share it with another nearby hospital or a nearby training center? Because if that can be done, it saves on resources for both. Once you take up the fact that you have to set up a wet lab, you have to decide on what it offers you. It is essentially a very important environment for introduction to steps of surgery in a risk-free environment to the resident, where he can do it with a much better frame of mind and much less tension. So you then go ahead with setting up a wet lab, and there can be the various steps that you have to think of when setting up an ophthalmology wet lab are setting up of a physical space, establishing the faculty, dedicated to the wet lab and having a defined curriculum, obtaining the practice eyes, how to stabilize them, get them ready for surgical work in the wet lab setting, and how to carry it on with funding. So the physical space that you require is there should be enough space for the trainer and the trainee to work in, and you need all these physical things in order to be able to carry out the work. But you need an assigned coordinator who will manage the place and make sure that it is functioning well. There should be an appropriate faculty for it with proper supervision. The residents should have a well-defined schedule, and there should be a faculty member for each session. But when the residents opt for additional sessions, they can co-opt, or they can work as peer groups, or they can have a senior resident with them. But a well-defined set of goals and curriculum is vital, and what is to be learnt at which stage should be defined when setting up a wet lab. The practice eyes must be obtained. Human cadaver eyes are ideal but may not be available, and the various animal models have been tried. Of course, there are model eyes which are available by Indian manufacturers as well, which can do a reasonable simulation but not exact. You need various devices to stabilize the eye, because you can't work unless you've stabilized it, and there are various kinds of mounts and designs of heads available which can be used. You also need to improve the experience to simulate that of a human eye. You can use fixatives, you can induce cataract by various means, and there have been descriptions of human cataract being implanted in the capsular bag in order to give a closer experience. Funding is often difficult, but you need to find resources once you've decided that at the beginning, and the resources to maintain the lab. So wet lab is an important component of our training which we must look at once we have started our residency program, and must find either in sharing or alone to develop it and find the resources for it. The other aspect that I'm dealing with is assessment of surgical performance by residents. Now, this is again very critical if you are to give a feedback to the residents and suggestions for improvement. And this can be done only if you assess them well. Now, the model that very many of us are currently using is based on preceptors or the teachers' ratings, which depends on their recall at the end of the posting, which may be very subjective, which may not be based on enough information, and is often inaccurate. Therefore, you need concise tools for assessment of the surgical skills for a very specific feedback and specific improvements. Various tools used for assessment. One is operative logbooks, then evaluation when they're working on animal models, the data or log or audit of what difficulties they've had, what complications they've had during surgery, direct observation of procedures, or video recordings. All of these methods have been used. But the most scientific tools that have been used include global rating of observed procedures. We'll specifically talk about that. Specific checklists for observed procedures. There are dexterity analysis system, and the virtual reality simulators have an assessment as well. But the direct observation using checklists or global rating systems have been shown to have highest reliability and validity. Let's look at what these are. Now, one of the best known ones is GRASIS, or a Global Rating Assessment of Skills in Intraocular Surgery. This essentially identifies all the skills with relation to, now you have a chart like this graded from 1 to 5, and we'll talk about what all it looks at. So it looks at the global indices rather than steps of a surgery. It would rate a surgeon for all the other aspects, but not for a specific surgery, for his global rating as a surgeon. It looks at his preoperative planning and knowledge about the patient that he's going to operate. knowledge of the surgical procedure, whether he's read up the procedure, whether he theoretically knows about it, whether he's seen enough videos on it, and whether he's familiar with the use of microscope, handling of instruments. Now this is where the wet lab comes in, if he's been in a wet lab before, and how he treats the ocular structures, how much respect he gives to the tissues. The other things that are looked at is flow of operation, time and motion, use of the non-dominant hand, which is important in ophthalmic surgery, knowledge of the equipment, vitrector, phaco system, surgical professionalism, interaction with the staff, and handling of the adverse events or complications, and then rated for the overall performance. But the Oscars were designed to rate the individual surgical skills in individual surgeries. Now this is by International Council of Ophthalmology. It's called the Ophthalmic Surgical Competency Assessment Rubric, or OSCAR. It's a standardized, internationally valid tool to teach and assess an ophthalmologist's competence in performing surgery. Now these have been published only after extensive review by several surgeons. Then it is circulated to a large group of experts who give their comments, who modify it, and only after a perfect, near perfect system of evaluation of these are these Oscars published. So it is a behavioral and skill-based rubric for evaluators, which assesses the resident's competence in an objective fashion and gives residents a tool to better know about their performance. Now the rubrics that have already been published and are available include those for extracapsular cataract extraction, phacoemulsification, small incision cataract surgery, pediatric cataract surgery, lateral tarsal strip procedure, strabismus, trabeculectomy, and vitrectomy. And there are many more in the pipeline. And these are available in languages other than English. All of them are available in English, but many of them are available in so many other languages as well. So let's look at the example of phaco. It would rate each step, starting from draping, eye positioning, scleral excess, coniscleral incision, viscoelastic. So every step, and this is for ECC, each step is evaluated with a score of 1 to 5. And this helps give a specific feedback on the steps that need improvement. So when we looked at the curriculum from Medical Council of India point of view, we decided that this may be too complex to be followed routinely in our busy operation theatre setting. So we put down a much simpler version for ICO, Oscar, ECC from the MCI. This is what we put in the suggested curriculum. So a simplified one can be routinely used by us to have a specific tool. It is easy to begin. Once you get used to it, it becomes a very handy tool to assess a budding surgeon, to give him a feedback, to see how he is shaped from first year to second year to third year, and thereby get a well-trained surgeon. So an appropriate use of resources is critical to impart surgical training, and a good evaluation system is an integral component of that. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, very much for your wonderful talk, and you've set the ball rolling for our discussions on surgical training. I would request you to please come up on the dais. We'll go on to the debates now. Do we have the first set of speakers, Dr. Indu and Dr. Trupti? Yeah. Great. So, training in wet lab before surgery on patient, required or not required? So, we start with required, Dr. Indu.
A very good afternoon to all the dignitaries on and off the dais. At the outset, I would like to thank AIOS ARC for giving me the opportunity to speak on this platform. The topic that I have today is training in wet laboratory is required before surgery on actual patients or not, and I am speaking for the view. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. This old adage by Benjamin Franklin cannot be more relevant as far as surgical training in ophthalmology is concerned. As we all know that ophthalmology sets itself apart from other surgical specialties in that it requires additional skills of hand-eye coordination, It requires microsurgical skills, that is working under the microscope, and you have to handle delicate tissues in a confined space. It becomes a multitasking of sorts when a resident is performing phacoemulsification. So all this becomes highly stressful and intimidating for a resident or a novice surgeon. And when the outcomes are suboptimal, the confidence of the surgeon nosedives. Also, there's a growing concern these days for ethical issues. Just because a certain patient is less demanding, less resourceful, does not mean that the patient deserves excellent outcomes any less. And we should not forget that we are dealing with human eyes, and we cannot afford to make too many mistakes. And if mistakes do happen, we cannot leave them unaddressed. So there's a growing emphasis on revamping the surgical training in India and worldwide. It has been told and suggested that there should be a comprehensive, structured, supervised curriculum for surgical training involving wet laboratory and the use of surgical simulators. Various studies have also proved that wet laboratory training helps the residents to get familiar with machine settings. It helps them to get familiar with ophthalmic microsurgical instruments. It helps them to get the optimal use of the operating microscope. And we all know that wet laboratory still remains the gold standard as far as learning proper wound construction is concerned and learning conioschleral suturing techniques is concerned. And all this the new surgeon can do in a non-stressful, risk-free environment. So there's a definite reduced learning curve, there is increased level of confidence, and there's a reduced number of complications and better outcomes when operating on live human eyes. Besides, the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education has recognized the importance of wet laboratory training in ophthalmology, and it has mandated the wet laboratory or simulation training in USA for ophthalmology residency programs. Now, I would like to say a few words about ICO OSCAR, which is this International Council of Ophthalmology designed this ophthalmology surgical tool to facilitate assessment and teaching of surgical skills. Here, the surgical procedures are broken down to individual steps, and each step is graded on a scale of novice, beginner, advanced beginner, and competent. A description of the performance is necessary to achieve each grade in each step is given. The assessor simply circles the observed performance and at each step of the procedure. The ICO OSCAR should be completed at the end of the case and immediately discussed with the student to provide timely, structured, specific feedback. So to summarize, I would like to say that modern ophthalmology has become a surgical specialty which involves state-of-the-art surgical procedures with excellent visual outcomes. Hence, students should be educated with specific and dedicated teaching programs involving wet laboratory experience and use of standardized assessment tools to ensure surgical competency and maximum safety. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go on to the other side and hear that it is not required.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am not totally against her, but today's talk, my objectives are not working.
Audio visual, please.
This is not working.
Could you please move the slide?
Not working. Yes. My objectives for today's talk are: the resident can learn good surgical skill without availability of higher and wet lab. Going fast. Sorry. The residents can learn good surgical skill without availability of higher and wet lab during his residency, and alternative methods for teaching surgical skills. Wet lab is luxury for everyone, but it is not available in government setup and many more other hospitals also. But nowadays it is mandatory to equip by MCI. Now, how to begin to have a cataract surgery? We are training our students. We are giving advice to them to see each and every patient on slit lamp after 3 months of orientation to subject and hospital environment. Interpupillary distance and stereopsis we are measuring. I advise them that they should have a good meditation to control their mind. They should have a good tissue respect. Every movement is at the level of risk during their surgery, so they can manage well. Learn to develop hand-eye coordination. Then minor surgeries like lead surgery, suturing, suture removal under microscope with less magnification. Chalcedon surgery under microscope. Learn easier steps initially, proceed for further steps. Now, how they will get hand-eye coordination development? They should learn microscope and they should do thread picking or on gauze piece with forceps under microscope, suturing on fabrics under microscope, cutting the fabrics on microscope. Now, what are the substitute for this practicing? They should practice section by drawing a straight line on paper under microscope. Scleral tunnel can be learned with the help of boiled egg or cardboard. CCC can be learned with the help of butter paper or IOL plastic cover or boiled potatoes. Goat's eye is ideal for everyone and it is easily available everywhere. Peritomy, section, scleral tunnel, side pot, AC entry, suturing can be learned on goat's eye, which is available. Same step can be repeated or can be done in human eyeball, which is contraindicated for corneal transplant. This is a bottle filled with cotton and which is wrapped with fine fabrics or fine this plastic. One can make side pot on it and inject viscoelastic in it so they can see what is fluid wave. When they will perform hydrodissection. Boiled egg can be tried for making section. First they are learning the theoretical aspect of surgical point. Audiovisual learning is mandatory and they are doing this. Then practicing on God's eye. Then we are giving them patient who is having mature cataract with poor prognosis, so they can learn on it. Then second year they start with easy and basic steps. Patient selection, now we are giving them immature cataract, which is both eyes immature cataract. In initial phase, each step is taught under close supervision of the faculty from side tubing of microscope and TV monitor. Few steps can be given in cases allotted to other senior faculty or residents. Third year, slowly mastering the more difficult step under supervision of faculty. CCC, lens matter wash to easier quadrant are done first with full irrigation followed by more difficult sub-incisional areas. Now we encourage them to learn hydrodissection in multiple areas. We encourage to do hydrodelineation to form multiple rings because they have to become a good phacosurgeon. Hydroelevation of pole of nucleus in SICS, delivery of nucleus with viscoelastic or wire vectis. This is operation theater, which is having good microscope with side tubing and CCTV monitor. Now, what is my take-home message? Cataract surgery is bread and butter for comprehensive ophthalmologists. Practice is the key to perfection. Every resident who is pursuing MS ophthalmology with basic surgical skill and absence of higher and wet lab can be good surgeon under guidance of senior teachers. We have to think globally, but we have to act locally. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the summary of both the talks were that some form of training in wet lab is required, whether it is using high technology or using locally available or steps. And I think in today's world, it would be a little unethical to start the resident to perform his first surgery or under microscope activity on a live patient. So I guess there are a lot of alternatives have been discussed. Sometimes, yes, financial issues are a problem. Dr. Grover, any comments on that?
I think the two speakers agreed on most aspects. It's just the proportion of what is to be done clinically and what is to be done in the lab situation. I think we all do agree that there has to be some exposure to handling instruments, handling the microscope, and being able to handle the eyes or tissues delicately before they go on to clinical setting. I think there is really no contentious issue here.
I'll ask the next speakers to please come on the dais. If there are any comments, we could simultaneously take. We'll be talking on residents to do surgery from first year versus from second year. Dr. K.R. Shivana would be speaking that from the first year onwards. They apparently are not there. So we'll start with Dr. Vaishali. She'll be speaking that only from the second year you would start, and then maybe we'll have somebody speak on informally on how we can have the first years also be involved in surgery.
If you
Dr.
allow,
Vishali.
I can vouch for first year residents also. But I was given the topic. So good afternoon, everybody. And though by my, from my heart, I feel that, and I do give my residence in the first year itself. But as I was given the topic to do from second year, so I'll debate that very vociferously. Thank you. So we teachers are also examiners. We go for so many undergraduate examiners in our colleges and also are all around India. And I think that is my, I guess most of the situation, it is pan-Indian situation is that undergraduate teaching, we are a lot of frustrated teachers because our undergraduates do not come to our clinics, do not attend our lectures. However hard we may try, we are trying our level best to get them back to the lectures and to the clinics. But unfortunately, in second year itself, so many students opt for the private coaching classes before the PG entrance exam. So frankly, the situation is that all undergraduates come, they get admission only thinking of post-graduation to get into the PG, and they are least interested in the undergraduate curriculum. So they are really far away from reality. And as junior resident 1, they are disoriented, they lack practical knowledge. Due to the NEET examinations, they are in a new place with newer adjustments. Most of them don't have proper accommodation. They don't get any food, proper food and everything. So, and hence knowledge is very far off in their mind, and they are, because I have already told, they have not been attending classes, so they are very poor in knowledge as well. Then we, in the operation theatre, we are talking about the surgical skills, and we need proper, we need our residents to have proper knowledge about the ethics and the hygiene. And then ours is, just as we have been discussing in this session, ours is an microsurgery. We need our residents to get trained in the under microscope, so their level of hand-eye coordination is much needed. They need to respect the tissue, and the handling is also very need to be proper. And hence, as already said, that their surgical anatomy knowledge is very poor. Most of them are under apprehension. As the setup is new, they may be depressed and anxiety, as we are all like student-friendly environment, so we have to take care of this anxiety and depression also. They may be very careless, and then early setting in of complacency can occur if they are doing their surgical skills in the first year itself. So this is what I feel, that yes, the students need to do the surgery from the second year, because in the first year itself, they need a lot of adjustment and they need to be properly trained in the wards. They are unable to even put an IV in the patients. They are unable to take the proper rounds. So first, let's train them in the first year and then start their surgical skill from the second year itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vaishali. Anybody who would want to put in a few points in favor of the first year? Yes.
So yeah, I agree that we should have from the first year, because ophthalmology is a very vast subject. We have a lot to do. So if you're going to waste our time in the first year doing a lot of things, I mean, I wouldn't say that you wouldn't do all the things you did, ma'am, but perhaps give 6 months to that and then get on with surgery, so that by the second year, at least you got your hands moving freely, and by third year, you're good enough to go out into society as a comfortable ophthalmologist and not be one to again have to go for another fellowship to learn cataract or, you know, the basic ones that you know. So I think we should start from first year. That's what I would think. 6 months for IV cannulations and all the rest, but definitely start off with first year.
I think there are two aspects to it. One is to improve the UG exposure. Yeah. She spoke about it, and that can only be done if our evaluations in the undergraduate exam become more genuine or authentic. Yeah. If we know that everybody is going to pass, then of course they don't have much stimulus to come in. True. Second solution will be what the NMC is now thinking of, is to equalize the postgraduate and undergraduate seats, so that the pressure on appearing only, thinking only of the entrance exam or NEET will go away, and then they will be ready for spending more time on clinical work or clinical training exposure during internship and so on. So I think that will be first step so that they are better exposed, they know all those IV cannulations, etc. from their undergraduation, and then they come into the post-graduation. Second aspect to consider is that we have the shortest postgraduate training program in the world. Nowhere else is it 3 years, it's generally 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, in UK or 6 years or something. So 3 years, and if we further delay it to second year, then we have very little time to have well-trained residents in surgery. So I think we must start from the first year at an appropriate time once they are ready, but make sure that they've had a good training during their UG and a good exposure to basic ophthalmology during their internship and during their final year.
So I think, as Dr. Vaishali had started with, she was, despite being on the other side, favored first year surgery, and I guess this topic flows from the first topic about wet lab training. So probably there has to be that initial period of wet lab training for in the initial 3 to 6 months when they start getting adjusted to operating under microscopes, operating with such fine needles and thread, and of course such fine instruments. And then as they move, as they get better, there should be no bar on them being able to. Plus, of course, extraocular procedures. If they don't start with that, then obviously their hand dexterity, their ability to perform under the microscope will obviously be delayed. So I guess, again, as Dr. Grover has also pointed out, we have to encourage them to get involved in these kind of activities as quickly as possible, do less stressful surgery in the beginning, and of course practice on whatever pre-trainers that can be available, either it's in a structured wet lab or an informal way of getting their hand-eye coordination under the microscope. So I guess this is a continuous process, and I don't think there can be any bars to anybody in performing. So thank you, Dr. Vaishali. That
Thank
was
you so much. Thank you.
very nicely presented. And we'll go on to the next topic. Again, unfortunately, we are not aware of whether the speakers are available or not. Yes, so we'll have second year resident surgical training by senior resident or fellow versus a faculty. Yes. So we don't, surgical training by senior resident Dr. Achayat Pandey. So we'll again go on to surgical training by faculty member. So Dr. Bhaskar would be speaking on surgical training by faculty member, and then we'll take up some points to see whether how good or bad surgical training by senior resident can be.
It's not a thing. This second year. This is wrong.
It's coming on this, I think.
Yeah, that's that. So I begin with the topic second year resident teaching. Shall I start? By resident or faculty, I have been given no financial disclosures here. So I have been asked to talk on surgical teaching by faculty member. Now before I start my talk, when I was a resident and when I used to see my teachers perform surgery, it was very easy looking from outside, very nicely stitching and all those suture. But when I took for the first time, it was very difficult just to hold the needle holder, and very difficult. And I used to just entangle those sutures there. So it should be graded by the, taught by the faculty, because he has more experience and he can guide the resident in a way. So this is when I was looking for prepare my topic, I got this by Fritz Posner, motor skill acquisition. So here, first cognition, he should know what he has to do, what technique he has to do. Then integration, how he has to do that. And then automation, after doing few things, that it should come into flow. Then he doesn't have to see now that he has to do this technique, this procedure after this. Just like in FECO, just by doing, he can just remember how, just he can guess at the sound of the FECO machine, whether a block is there or not, and how much he has to press the foot pedal. So that's automation. And now to develop surgical skills, it has been already discussed. We can do on models like goat eye model and other, and on live animals, but now this is not permitted. Cadaver eyes, simulators. Now this virtual reality. here we can do, and then finally is to come to the human, and that should come first through the faculty member, and then he knows the details here. Now, why faculty member has, I prefer because he has more experience, he has seen more problems, and he can solve it easily than a senior resident or a fellow. And he can just tackle the problem easily. He has managed more patient in the, and he has also learned, faculty has more interaction with other ophthalmologists, national and international forums. So he can just impart that knowledge to his residents, while fellows have not that much. So that was my short talk. I think within time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Bhaskar.
Thank you.
Faculty can be trusted to be on time at least.
Yeah.
So, yes, Dr. Niluparna, any views on whether you would let your fellow or your senior resident train the...
Definitely, if our wet lab program, just as you said, that the flow should be from the beginning, that is from the wet lab from the first year till the resident becomes a senior resident in his third year, he should have acquired that skill to manage the complications and even to know each step particularly in a way that he can teach the residents. So I feel that if the entire training process is managed in a SOP, that is standard operating protocol, what we say in every surgery, then we can, I think, hand this over to senior residents definitely. But at certain points of time, I also feel that faculties are much more experienced, they have much more knowledge, and they have seen and done much more cases. So I feel at one point of time they also need to intervene and have an interaction with the students, that is the second years, to enhance their surgical skills.
I think a whole set of surveys done in India from various parts of the country have shown
Yes.
that surgical training is one of the weakest of our
Yes, sir.
trainings,
Definitely.
and which implies that most of our postgraduates or residents learn their surgery after they have passed,
Yes, they are
and they become a
post-graduate.
senior resident. So they are in effect a postgraduate or a resident after they pass out in terms of surgical learning, and that is where probably our faculty has to therefore chip in and
Chip
be
in,
a
yeah,
be a
yeah.
part of the trainers, because a trainer with adequate skill set and the right mindset is essential
Yes.
for training.
Yeah.
If we reach a stage where our residents learn in their residency and they're good trained surgeons by then and have done the minimum standards prescribed by Medical Council
Yes.
of India in terms of numbers, then that stage may come where we can think of fellows or residents being
Senior
the trainers.
residents.
Although it may vary from institution to institution, it may vary from certain institutions where residents do a lot of surgery, even the final year residents are working as trainers. So all those can be, of course, customized, but we generally have to work very hard towards making the standards of the residency training well, surgical training very good, before we think of senior residents or fellows being the trainers.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Any other comments from the house? So I would tend to summarize and say that although the bulk of training and the real load of surgical training should be with the faculty, again, finally the patient care does rest with the faculty and their responsibility. So outcomes have to be ensured. Training is a part of the whole thing, but in the end we have to justify and provide visual outcome to the patient. So the buck stops with the faculty, of course, but certain areas could probably be assisted by or supported by a senior resident or a fellow, so that the transition does take place. Otherwise, with the amount of activities that faculty is supposed to or expected to do, there may be those gaps in training, and that may be reflective of the limitations that current postgraduates are having as far as their care is concerned. It's not possible to completely let them operate on their own, and if a faculty does not have that time or available opportunity to, then the training suffers. So I guess, again, every institution has to weigh the management. Yes, Dr. Bhaskar, last comment before we think of.
Just before, I think every surgery should be recorded also. So after that, he can just find out that he is well wrong.
Mm. That is definitely true, sir.
Yeah.
So even we have what we practice in our institute is that myself being a wet lab trainer, and then we do the first case is under the wet lab trainer on the human eye, and then he performs the steps, and only after that he is allowed to go under the supervision of other senior residents also. So in that way, you can record your videos and then later on sit with him and discuss the case and each and every step, what, where, and how it should have been done. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it is the human eye, and you have to respect that, and you have to look at the outcome. That is, the visual outcome is more important.
Yeah, in that way, we are lucky that ophthalmology is all microsurgery, and inexpensive recording systems are now available, and which makes a huge difference if the recording can be done and looked at. But more important than recording is the time given by faculty to look at those recordings and give a feedback based on them.
So we go on to the last set of last debate. Third year resident, independent surgery versus supervised surgery. Dr. Siddharth, yes, he'll be speaking on independent surgery. I think yours is on that. Yours should be on that podium. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be discussing the issues related to independent surgery by the third year residents. Third year is a period of increasing awareness and building confidence. However, there is a lack of receptivity to instructions by the senior assistant, and we see that the third years become more overconfident. There's a zeal to complete every step and the entire surgery by self. However, the surgical expertise varies between institutions. As all the residents begin their cataract surgery from conventional ECCs to SICS and phacoemulsifications, the first step being the superior rectus suture, they may be taking it just conjunctival and hence inadequate exposure of the superior quadrant. There's a zeal to make a small incision as far as possible, so there is grossly initiation of a very small peritomy in the first place, and then there may be bleeding issues that may be anticipated later, and there can be post-operative hyphema that we may see the next day. There's a tendency to do excessive cautery and then resulting in limbal ischemia. There may be multiple primary incisions which the third year resident may be making independently, or there may be a creation of a deep tunnel which can cause impending premature entry. So the resident may just start with a small pupil with inadequate dilatation and eventually land up with a small anterior capsular excess. There's a lack of decisiveness to use pupillary stretchers. They're small or peripherally extended. In situations when the capsulotomy has extended, they may still continue with the surgery and continue with phaco without a hitch. And there's a tendency, since there are now no capsular excess, there's a tendency to perform capsular excess in conventional ECCs, which should not be a dictum. There's a tendency also to do excessive hydrodissection if unsupervised, and hydrodelineation is usually missed. So that should not be the case. Their nucleus handling is of course a problem. There's inadequate nucleus rotation prior to performing shifting to phaco, and they may keep on rotating the nucleus without realizing that they have broken the zonules. So that should also be a situation which should be considered, and there may be a small, they may use very small incisions to deliver a large nucleus, and the tendency to put not put a suture at the end of it. There are various issues related to phaco probe. There may be, because they're really concentrating on the nucleus, the Sinskey hook may be, or the dialer may be just touching the phaco probe all the time. Endothelium may be damaged if it goes unsupervised, and overlooked DMD may be there. And obviously since they are under training, there may be lack of use of a non-dominant hand, which has to be insisted by a supervisor. There may be a deep trench or excessive pressure on the capsular bag while cracking the nucleus. This is a very common thing which we see with the residents, that they're doing, they're feeding the nucleus with the tip of the second instrument, and it causes the risk of metal dispersion, which should be obviously taken care of. Once the PCR happens, there's a panic, which usually happens at the last nuclear piece. There's an overlooked PCR. Once a deepening of anterior chamber is seen, they may just miss it. They may put a IOL without realizing that there is no capsular bag there. And there's a tendency to play with the vitreous and do a manual vitrectomy, which should not be encouraged. There may be leaky side ports, as in this case, and they are constantly doing the surgery, and obviously there's a lot of surge that they experience. There's indecisiveness to convert the ongoing surgical technique. They proceed with phaco without considering that there's an alternative way. there's obviously a resistance to put sutures in the leaky wounds, be it a side put also. IOL issues are obviously very important. Small incisions are usually used for IOL insertion. There will be obviously a DMD. They may leave IOLs in the bag or sulcus, and then there's obviously a difficulty in repositioning the IOL back into the bag. And as in the second case, we can see this put so much of pressure on the lens to be put in the bag, which can cause zonular dehiscence. So there's obviously a resistance to put AC IOL, forgetting PIs in anterior chamber IOLs and not covering the wounds. Other surgeries that they perform are pterygium surgeries. There may be excessively deep corneal lacerations that lamellar incision that may put. Many centers, intravitreal injections are also being given by the third year residents. So they lack the care to instill betadine eye drop, glove change before every surgery, and inappropriately measuring the side. OGIs are also repaired. They need to see it also. And squint surgery DCRs need to be assisted. So to summarize, the call for help should be quick. The later the call, the complications are more and difficult to handle. So I feel that the senior supervision is always indispensable. Thank you.
I thought you were supposed to speak on independent surgery.
So I feel that independent surgery would just take off the load, but it
That's
will not
most
lead to
unfortunate
quality.
because Dr. Krishna here would have, I mean, of course, she'll concur, we'll hear her side before we come to a conclusion, but it's difficult because you already. All through the presentation, I was wondering when it will reverse swing.
Can you speak for reversing?
No, I have certain drawbacks of the unsupervised.
So please go ahead.
So good afternoon to everybody. At the outset, I would like to thank AIOS for giving me this opportunity to speak on this topic, supervised surgical training for third year residents, which I will be speaking in favor of this. Ophthalmology is one of the exciting subspecialty with continuous changes and advancement, and the surgical training and transfer of surgical skills is the need of the hour. Our residents should be reasonably proficient in this surgery by the end of their training period. So by definition, surgical training is an apprenticeship where the trainee learns to perform surgery under the supervision of a trained surgeon. Our aim is to produce competent, confident, and self-motivated professionals. Surgical training can be of these types, like assisted, where the trainer is scrubbed or the trainer is unscrubbed. Our surgical training should be competence-based rather than time-based. So what the literature says, there are few studies done in India, like from Maharashtra and from South India, where they have found out that residency program in ophthalmology is not up to the expectations of postgraduate students in many teaching centers. And according to a survey in the US, nearly 1/3 of the residents enrolling for ophthalmology resident programs do not graduate into eye surgeons, rather they continue as medical ophthalmologists. And a large difference exists between the number of surgeries the students felt they should ideally perform and the number of surgeries they have done so far. So to compare the results, I did a small survey in my state, Odisha, where I included the current third year postgraduate residents. And what I found out that 24 out of the 26 residents, they preferred supervised surgery, supervised training, and that too from a senior consultant. And the situations where they found indispensably supervision, they required supervision, was during cortical aspiration, during cataract surgery, and during doing an osteotomy in DCR. So what are the benefits of supervised training? It's a tailored approach which targets the needs of the residents. It is started with theory and then followed by a simulator practice. The residents maintain a logbook where they can record their cases and they can learn from their mistakes. And we can evaluate the skills from time to time by like the ICU Oscar which sir had told before. And the residents can record their videos, own surgical videos, which they can discuss with their trainer later in the day. They learn how to manage complications and to handle difficult situations. And at last, they develop a good teacher-student relationship for their whole lifetime. But as we all know that a rose is not without thorns, and this sort of teaching has also drawbacks. And this sort of teaching is time consuming. It has variable effectiveness because of a long learning curve.
There are chances of medical error which may lead to serious complications. Lastly, I would like to conclude with the famous saying of a famous ophthalmologist, Dr. William Bainbridge Glue, that it is far more important to have 35 closely examined cases, each one improving on the previous one, than it is to have 300 cases that are just done without that close examination. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody wanting to say in favor of independent surgery? Which I doubt. I mean, besides, of course. Please, please, Dr. Vaishali. That's so nice to see. An interesting thought, although, I mean, besides the fact that it may not be true in most conditions, the other thing has been pointed out by Siddharth, that recognition of problems sometimes, even for experienced surgeons, may not be. So it takes that experience to recognize early recognition of complications, which obviously only experience can bring. The other thing, of course, is the medical legal aspect of it. So if there are complications, and this case has been unsupervised by a faculty, or at least by somebody who is a trainer, at least at the level of a senior resident or a fellow who has the ability or the recognition of, you know, supervising and supporting, complications may have medical legal issues. So like I said, besides the fact that, you know, most residents may not have that expertise in the third year to be able to manage cases, although again it should be as hands off as possible, because within a few months they're going to do the surgery on their own. But it's like near life surgery, they should get the near free experience, but always under supervision. So any other thoughts before we close?
I think the last line was most important. It is the extent of supervision which can vary. During the last year, you are very soon going to certify him to be an independent practitioner of ophthalmology, and therefore closer towards the end, if our objective is to be fulfilled, if we have improved our surgical training during the residency years, there should be a relative independence where somebody is available. They are not operating without there being a faculty in the operation theatre, but most of the steps or most of the surgery or all of the surgery they are doing on their own, provided they have done enough under supervision, and our Oscar and our trainings, our evaluations have shown him to be a reasonably safe surgeon. The confidence before leaving the residency should be that he is able to do the surgery independently.
Yeah, madam, as Dr. Rohit rightly mentioned, that officially, whatever nowadays all CCTV, etc., there, that one person, faculty should be in the area of the OT. This is a very much important. So anybody, because that if anything happen, you don't know what will happen. There may be, it does not depends on that all, everything is under the, even the government, non-government, private, everyone is under the CPA. So in such a scenario, I'll just take one of my thing is that I always, if that until an patient is received by the ward sister, till that one faculty or one that register level person should be in that OT. That's a one important point.
I think, thank you everybody, and it was a wonderful, yes sir.
Just last suggestion, if we combine the second and the third debate, what we essentially come to is that what will be a better practice is that the second year residents who are at the beginning of their surgical career should be supervised by a senior faculty member. If you inculcate the good habits, the good chains from the beginning, then over the next 4 semesters, they develop more confident surgeons. And I totally agree with Dr. Grover that in the last semester, the surgery of a third year resident should more be supervised by a fellow or a senior resident whom they are comfortable with. Because unless you give them that level of confidence that you can go out and operate independently, they are again going to be lacking that and looking for a fellowship or some certifiable course elsewhere.
Thank you. I think we have completed all the topics and a very interesting debate. We will now hand over the session. I would request Dr. Dipankar Das to please come up and convene the next session. Thank you everybody.